This week on To the Contrary.
First, older women changing the American workforce. Then, financial support for United Nations women. Behind the headlines, meet the stay-at-home mom hailed as one of the heroes to emerge from the Flint Water Crisis.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the changing labor market.
A major demographic shift is transforming the U.S. workforce. The number of women 65 and older working today is increasing, while all other categories of workers are seeing declines or remaining flat. 1 in 7 older women works today, compared with 1 in 12 in 1992. And the Labor Department projects that number will be 1 in 5 by the year 2024, or 6.3 million workers. The reasons are mixed. They include changes in the pension system, increased debt due to the recession, but on the plus side, many of these older women workers say they stay on the job because the work is rewarding. Economists and policymakers are researching the impact of this trend on the job market. They want to know if there's a connection between the increased number of older women in the workforce and sluggish wage growth.
So, Patricia Sosa, is the fact that more women 65 plus are re-entering the workforce or staying in the workforce a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing for women that are healthy and that's what they want to do, and it's a bad thing for women that are not healthy but are doing it because they cannot meet their financial needs.
I think it's a good thing. Men and women are all living longer, so retiring at 65 or 60 is just not the way it should be anymore.
I think it's great. The longer women want to work, they should go for it.
I think it's a good thing. I think with the gig economy, you're seeing different types of opportunities for women to work well beyond 65.
But then why are they being paid less than other sectors of the economy? I mean, if it's such a great thing, why is there still the wage gap?
I think it's a tough question to answer. I think at this point, it's difficult to understand why that factor still is in place.
I think it's because ageism is real. The other day, an elderly woman came to pick me up in my Uber, and the whole 5 minutes I was debating if I should cancel or not, because I was like, what if she can't work her GPS? And then I was like, but she's an Uber driver.
But that's ageist.
I know. I called myself out.
But as a
feminist,
campaigner against sexism and
but I
racism,
called myself out.
You're an ageist.
Right.
But I called myself out. I was like, that is so ageist of me. And I kept her, and you know what? She was great.
And I had an Uber driver today coming to the studio who was the same. I don't know if it's the same woman, but she was retired. She's like, I've been retired, and but I got tired of my kids wanting me to babysit all the time. So she's got to do this, between 10 and 2 p.m. every day.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And she's like, I meet great people. I make some extra money. I'm not sitting at home.
Yeah.
She's like, I love this. So there's a lot more of those kind of jobs now that people can make a choice. That's right.
Is it technology? Is it all technology?
I think it's a big part of it.
Well, there's a variety of issues here. The fact is also that many of these women were at home raising their kids and they joined the workforce later. That's what the studies, the reports are showing. And of course, when you join the workforce later, you
mean rejoin or join?
Rejoin. Many of them join or rejoined.
Right.
And so they're going to be entering at a lower salary. So when they reach that age, they're just really behind. And so that's part of the problem. The other problem is retirement, saving for retirement, particularly the sector of divorced women that were raising their kids by themselves and were unable to save for retirement. So they're facing the older age. What we're seeing, the data is showing with a lot of debt in their house. Their houses are not fully paid. They still have mortgages, and they don't have enough retirement. So they have to work. This is not nice. This is not because I'm bored at home. This is really they have to work. They have no choice.
Do you know what percentage, though? Because a certain percentage are, in the report it said, they are going back because they're choosing, they want to work. They don't want to sit at home.
Absolutely. I cannot remember the actual percentage, but yeah, I agree. It's a complex issue.
It's a mix. I think women have their
but there is
reasons.
an important issue for those that don't have a choice, and that's worrisome.
But
Right.
Patricia makes a great point about financial management, and I think about the fact that the savings rate is tremendously low in this country. It has been. It peaked sort of around 17% back in the 70s, but you're looking at the average family that has maybe 4 or 5% in terms of a national savings rate. So if I don't have a good savings account and I don't have the flexibility to say I can retire at 65, and I don't know if Social Security is going to be there for me, and I don't have a great 401k, I'm really limited in my ability to be able to not have to stay in the workforce as long as possible. And so women are making tough choices, and we talk about this from a policy perspective. You're looking at Republicans looking at different ways to navigate this, and some of that has to do with portability. So not everyone has a 401k, so how do I get to the next place?
I must say, I am shocked, absolutely shocked, at what has happened to savings. And people in my generation, a colleague, a classmate at an Ivy League school died recently of brain cancer, and he was penniless. He had freelanced for magazines all his life, and then essentially stopped working and joined the 99% and Occupy Wall Street movement. But I'm thinking, how do you get into your 60s with no money in the bank?
And aren't a lot of these people also recovering from the financial, disaster? So I think we have to take that into consideration.
But this was not one of those. This was a guy who lived on the edge his whole life. And then,
but Bonnie, because some people make poor choices, right? I mean, some of it, it's a mix of you've had something bad, something happened, circumstance.
And that's the point, which what percentage do we know of people who end up in retirement have Ivy League degrees and are making bad great educations, and or good educations or decent educations.
But Bonnie,
and they still don't think about saving. I remember saving from my first job in the 70s when I was making $13,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm going to say. We need more Bonnies out there. Here's as a country, when we've basically said we're going to take care of you, and Social Security is going to be there, and we don't remind people that was always supposed to be supplemental. It was never supposed to be what you retire on. Many people, that's what they end up with, and they also realize that people, like I said at the top of the show, people are living longer. So this is not even just an individual interview or issue like today. As a country, we got to deal with the fact people retiring at 62 and going on Social Security and living to be 80, 85 is robbing the next generation. We can't keep doing that, or they're not going to have anything except debt left over.
But education, she's right. Why aren't high school classes running, or even middle school classes?
I totally agree with you. I absolutely
agree
with you. I feel I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I'm trying to find out if I can get a financial management manager come to my house and teach her, and me. And I'm lucky because I've been working for a long time, and the infrastructure of my employer have provided me with what I need for retirement. But it's complex. It's a very complex environment. And in this era of inequity, of people just barely making it, to pretend that they're going to be saving and they're going to be doing 401ks, and you're going to build an entire policy of retirement on that is not realistic.
People used to do it. I feel like there's a generational shift happening with savings.
Right. I'm smiling when you say this now, but I'm thinking, what did it was a fear of getting old and poor.
Yes.
From the beginning of my, I did not have a financial education. Even my parents didn't teach me to save. I don't know where I got it from, but and I got out of graduate school very young, but from the beginning, I was afraid of getting old and poor. How do we reinstill that in people?
I think for us, it's about personal responsibility. I think it's for a lot of folks. I think generationally speaking, we talk about millennials. Maybe they're in a different place and they haven't been taught some of these values. But at the end of the day, the primary sort of focus to keep us out of the situations that we're going to be in as retired folks, to be older and poor, is going to be find a way to start people sooner down that path of saving money and investing in their future.
Good point. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter @BonnieUrbay or @ToTheContrary. As Women's History Month and International Women's Day approach, UN Women, the agency advocating for women's advancement, knows well what women need globally. But Executive Director Phumzile Mlambo Nyuka says while the UN bureaucracy says it's for women's rights, the budget says otherwise.
The fact that there is no country that has achieved gender equality, even though we've been so busy, just shows that the change has not been deep enough and strategic enough.
The UN set goals in all areas, not just for every woman, man, and child, but for each country to achieve. In the past, those goals targeted poor countries. But now, Mlambo Nyuka says gender discrimination is alive and well in developed or Western countries, too.
What we have tried to do is to look at how, across the board, in every sphere of life, we address gender inequality, because it is a very complex problem. It needs a comprehensive solution.
So gender is included in all 17 goals set up by the UN. Goal number 5 focuses directly on improving the lives of women and girls.
Going forward, it is about intensifying implementation. We are focusing on what is measurable.
But achieving these goals could prove challenging because the UN is not fully funding UN women.
There's room for more support. The 190 countries that make up the UN, they are the ones that provide, for instance, the funding that makes us do our work. Right now, when we were founded as UN Women, we were expected to have a budget of about $500 million per annum.
The actual budget has been closer to $300 million, which UN Women says speaks volumes.
If this was one of the important issues, the money would talk. Politically, we get a lot of support, but when it comes into investment, I think a member state thinks that we must just do a cake sale. And the way women raise money. They don't understand that gender equality is expensive if you really want to do it well.
All right. You say the word UN to most people and they tune to another channel. Americans don't really care much about the United Nations, unfortunately. So explain to women who are watching and men why this is important.
Well, this is important because actually the U.S. played a critical role in not only creating the UN, but is still one of the largest countries that pays the majority of the UN's bills. But in being specific with UN Women, what's a big issue is that where's the money? To quote Jerry Maguire, you've got to show me the money. I think it's great that we have such goals like to eradicate sex trafficking and discrimination against women and violence against women, but we need funding and a very specific strategy. And you know, it's painful to criticize the UN because I've worked with the UN, I've worked for the UN, and their intentions are so good and their existence is so important and symbolic, but we almost need a better business strategy, and funding the UN can't be something that's optional and something you just drop your penny at. We rely on donations from member states. Are you kidding me? We need a budget. A very old mentor of mine, Elise Meal, always used to say that women don't ask for enough money, and when you're dealing with the government, you got to ask them for double because they're going to give you half. And
yeah, but what does it say about the UN? Even those good people up there, men and women who are running the agency, didn't fully fund it.
I think that's crazy. I think you cut off, when they were launching UN Women, it was supposed to be amazing. We were putting together Dawn, UNIFEM, all these women's agencies together under one flagship. But what is the point if there's no money? You really can't do anything.
Explain what they...
But I mean, I feel like we're talking about the federal government here all of a sudden. It's like, because it's gotten so big, it tries to do so much, and you know what, there are only so many dollars at the end of the day. And, I'm not a huge fan of the United Nations, I'll be clear about that, but they can do some good things. But if you try to do everything and you're going to fund everything, and you're right, you don't really have a real budget. There's always been questions of accountability with the UN, just like there's usually questions about how well the government spends money when it's trying to solve a problem. So I don't even know that I do know it does not spend the dollars that it's given as well as it certainly could and should. But the reality is I think it's taken on way too much, and therefore you get in all these debates about what's the priority, and people disagree about that.
Well, it's not the most efficient system, and certainly the fact that they're not investing in a very important priority, which is in women equality and improvement of the well-being of women and girls, is very tragic. At the same time, there is a purpose for this agenda. This is not a waste of time, complete waste of time. There's a purpose because in the United States we don't pay attention to the UN, but around the world they do. Around the world, they do care about human rights treaties. Around the world, they care about UNICEF, and the UN and their programs can impact. And I see it because I work internationally, that we use international treaties to put pressure politically at the local level. And we have some good results. And, saying that they're eliminating the kind of discriminations, that they're calling for women to have access to education, to have access to jobs, to have access to being elected in countries.
Stop being beaten.
Yeah, exactly. It's not inconsequential if you're, for example, in some of these Middle Eastern countries when women have zero rights.
Countries
and let's point out that it's really, in terms of United States influence globally, it's really important. And as we become more of a global world, it's really important for us to have influence. And if we're not funding the UN, that's one of the ways we're losing influence, because countries only care about how much money they get from you. Really, I've been to 70 countries, and you know, in Morocco, they didn't give a big cell contract to a U.S. company because there was a French company, it used to be a French protectorate. The French pour billions into Morocco and their other former protectorates, and so the contract went to a French company, and this is a loss of U.S. jobs.
Well, I think it's important for the U.S. to obviously invest in the UN Women Initiative, and I think one of the things that I heard earlier is about strategy. And I think there doesn't seem to be a cohesive strategy about how to use the money that they have presently, and even beyond that, what to do with that. And in my mind, you look at different laboratories. You're not going to fix.
Well, suppose what they're doing, because this is important for viewers. They're going around the world and they're getting data. They're rating countries in terms of how well they treat women and how well women do there. And if you don't have the data, you can't make these comparisons. And the fact is, Western countries, except for the Nordic countries, are falling behind. And even though America thinks it's the best place in the world for women, and I, as a woman, would rather live here, and I'm very proud to be an American, but the fact is we're falling behind where we were 20 and 30 years ago in terms of gender parity.
Right, and one of the issues that was raised in that analysis and the data was talking about economic equality and how women need to look at different ways. And in different countries and in different cultures and in different environments, that becomes more pressing. Obviously, we have a different situation here in the United States where we have barriers and we have that wage gap. But at the same time, we're looking at opportunities for equality that could help lift up and fix things like hunger and discrimination issues.
All right. And a great point to move to the next topic, which is behind the headlines, the water crisis in Flint. As the situation gets the attention of presidential hopefuls in Michigan, prior to the primaries, Flint residents still can't trust their tap water. We speak with the mom who had to become a water safety expert to protect her own children.
There was a bunch of us that brought in discolored water. When I was showing them my bottles of water, I was told by the emergency manager that I was a liar and that I was stupid. I was a liar if I thought anyone would believe this was my water, and I was stupid if they thought it actually came from my tap.
LeeAnne Walters is a stay-at-home mom of 4, and hers is one of the many families affected by the toxic water in Flint, Michigan.
We had different things happening with our family, rashes, hair loss, dizziness, headaches, and one of my children was not growing properly. He was breaking out with really severe rashes every time he came in contact with the water, so we knew something was going on. And the only thing that was making sense was the fact that by January my water was coming through brown consistently.
Yet the government denied it and tried to absolve itself of any responsibility. Walters says since the city switched water sources, up to 12,000 children have been exposed to all manner of health problems, including lead poisoning. One of those cases was Gavin, one of Walters' 4-year-old twins. The city said the problem was in Walters' home only, and they sought payment to install a service line they claimed would fix the issue.
They were trying to convince me to sign this contract that I didn't agree with. They wanted me to put a number on what my son's lead poisoning was worth, and I don't know how to do that. How do you put a number on your child being poisoned? When I wouldn't sign the contract, it was said to me that they would hate to see something happen to my children because I wasn't putting my children's best interest first by allowing poison to come into my home. And I asked if they were threatening me with CPS, and they said no. And I said, well, it sounds like it to me. You need to leave. I'm not allowing anything into my home. I didn't cause this. My house didn't have this problem. My water didn't have this problem before the switch.
Walters sought outside help. She was in touch with the Environmental Protection Agency and several researchers and doctors. In the process, she became an expert in water quality.
When I realized just the severity of this, that's why I made sure it went public, because people had a right to know. They had a right to know that they were being harmed.
With the help of water experts, Walters ran tests that vindicated her story. And Walters says the government had taken shortcuts to make the water appear safer than it was.
They falsified documentation to make it look like they were doing okay so they wouldn't get hit with a violation.
Walters recently testified before Congress for the need to, once and for all, solve the city's water problem. Though the fight isn't over, she's being hailed as an everyday hero. She tells other women to follow their instincts.
If something doesn't seem right, if you feel like someone's not being honest, research, do your research, and know that anybody can make a difference if you really want to.
So Genevieve, the Senate recently reached a deal to help cities like Flint replace their aging pipes. That's the problem. Well, that and changing the source of water. Is the federal government doing enough to help?
Well, it may help with this one problem if the pipes are the problem. But I think, look, what happened in Flint, and let's be clear, Flint, Michigan, it's not the only place. A new case has just come out. Crystal City, Texas, very similar problem here. And again, same problem, failure at the local level, failure at the state level, failure at the federal EPA level in terms of dealing with the problem. So, and the problem though then is, then we turn to the government to fix it again, even though they have failed at every single level in these communities, and we're asking them to do it again. I think.
But how how could the private sector fix this? You would have to get them. You would have to pay to do it, and who would pay to do it?
Well, I mean, one of the problems here is, I mean, they were threatening her. I'd like to be able to sue whoever was in charge of that water plant. Those people should be paying fines. Somebody should be going to jail. But you can't really sue the EPA, right? And this is a problem. Even though the EPA itself has sued plenty of private companies when they claim, oh, you were in this mine system and you caused a water problem, they sue those companies, but yet they themselves take no responsibility.
But some of the residents of Flint actually knew that the water source being shifted was actually that river. The Flint River used to be a toxic waste dump for General Motors. I have to say, as a Bangladeshi born and raised there, this is shocking that this is happening in America. Clean water, access, arsenic poisoning, this is stuff that happens in quote-unquote developing countries. I was shocked reading about it.
Yeah. I think people feel like there's a basic right to at least having clean water in your home in the United States and all over the world. And one of the things that we're seeing with the Flint crisis is that this is a humanitarian crisis. It isn't a Republican or Democrat. This isn't poor people and rich people. This isn't blacks and whites. This is literally an issue that's impacting thousands of people in Flint, and there was clearly a breakdown in the system that needs to be corrected.
Well, is that why the Senate was able to come to together and cut a deal?
Yes.
I mean, I was going to say, is this one small example of bipartisan politics coming back?
Yes, absolutely. And, let's give credit also to Virginia Tech. She actually reached out to Virginia Tech. They have an environmental engineering program, and they came in and they exercised a lot of leadership and guided her. She's definitely an unsung hero, or now a well-known hero. And I think the government has to function. We have to be able to live in community. And this is an example of dysfunctional government, and I don't think turning into the private sector will have solved this problem. I think we need to take our government seriously, and I think everybody's to be blamed. The Republican governor of Michigan, the federal EPA under Obama, I will blame them all, and at the same time ask them to start working together and fix this problem. Because you cannot sustain a country, because we're going to turn into some of these developing countries that we like to complain about.
Well, and I'm not saying you throw the government out. I'm just saying the government has to be held accountable. And I think part of the problem here, the reason it went on for so long is because it was government.
I want to go back, Genevieve, to what you can sue individuals can sue the federal and state governments. There are bars you have to overcome.
Very high bars.
But it's not accurate that you can't sue
No,
them.
it's not accurate. You can't, but it's very hard to do that. And in this case with the EPA and others, they don't hold their own people responsible. That's my overall point, is that if you're going to go that road, we're going to have more places like this happening. It won't just be Flint. It won't just be Crystal City, Texas.
Well, the elections are the accountability system for government, and we should get elected people
like her.
Yeah, this woman's a hero, and she shouldn't have had to have been a hero. Someone should be able to help her figure this out. Besides Virginia Tech, she shouldn't have had to take this on her own hands, protect her children and her family.
Go moms.
Yeah, go moms.
Well, how much if the federal government deal, if the Senate deal is to replace the pipes, how much of this is an infrastructure problem?
It's a huge infrastructure problem. We have, if you look at the ratings, I mean, besides the other bridges, roads, all these things we're dealing with in our country right now, $1 trillion of that could go to fixing these lead pipes all over the country, and that's a lot of money in investing in infrastructure that we need to address. But not every place is like Flint. So.
But and also, what about race? I mean, we can't. I mean, would this have? When you look at the timeline of how long this was happening, if this was a neighborhood or an area of largely white people and moderate middle class white people, how long would this even have been allowed or occurred? 41% of the population of Flint are lower income black families. I think race has a lot to do with it. I don't know why everyone's ignoring the big fat pink elephant in the room.
Why do you think they're ignoring it? I think it's all over this issue.
No, I'm talking about us today. I mean, it hasn't come up.
You're bringing it up.
That's why I'm bringing it up. Let's not forget race.
It's often poor communities that you're right. They're the ones who get hit first with these because they often don't have somebody advocating for them. Thankfully, this woman was a citizen who advocated on behalf of her community. But look, I mean, I think the infrastructure thing, America's getting older. It's not, you know, we're older. Our communities are older now, and our infrastructure is getting older. And the problem is, again, states have, to a great extent, and local communities have given all that responsibility to the federal government to keep it fixed. That isn't going to work, folks, because the federal government isn't there. It's people in their communities that need to be in charge of it.
All right, that's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/tothecontrary, where you can learn about the To the Contrary inaugural Film Festival, which coincides with the beginning of our 25th season on PBS, which starts in March. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.